morning. Some of the things we'll just talk about. Mike?
Yeah, you want to set it for Mike?
That's awesome. Test two. Okay, welcome to Hidden Gems in Cincom Smalltalk. I gave a little preview to this morning. This is the agenda, some of the hidden gems in the browser, some code ideas, collection gems, framework, store, and loader are the areas that I'll be talking about. You saw this morning. These are the other Cincom talks that we'll have here. So the first thing that I want to discuss is, okay, what is a hidden gem? And a hidden gem is basically anything that's useful in the product that may not be obvious. And like I mentioned this morning, sometimes a lot of you're going to be thinking, well, everybody knows that. And I'm really hoping I have a few gems that people who are very familiar, never came across that one, or might give you some ideas of other things that could be really useful. So one of the things that brought about this idea some years ago, we had an engineering meeting, and I happened to be looking over the shoulder of one of the engineers, and it's like, wait a second, how did you just do that? And he skipped a step that I always took, and he did something much more quickly, and he showed me. So there are a number of things that may not be obvious that can be very useful, and it's up to us to share those things with other developers. Do you know a hidden gem? If so, please share that. Send me if you have any ideas. Please send that to me. I will absolutely give full credit to anybody who sends me some ideas. And I do regular screencasts with hidden gems that you can find on our website. So if you have an idea, please share. And I've even got a couple before, so all the experience. I'm sure lots of people here have lots of ideas. So this morning, I showed you some of the gems with sizing, where you can size the window to what you want, close it, when you reopen it, it's that size you want. Spawn, where you can basically narrow the universe that you're looking at in your browser, and I find that really, really useful, because if you want to just work with your subset of code, or have it right there at your fingertips, and easy to find, it's right there. A typical problem in Smalltalk is you end up opening lots and lots of windows. One means of addressing that is the tabs that we have, or actually hidden tabs, built into these browsers. So you can basically have many browsers within one window and move between those. I talked about browser in context. I'll show you that when we move over to the image. And forward backwards, I'll show you that also. I'm going to skip through the screencast that we saw this morning. So some last ones of the browser is this list right here. And, okay, let me try something. See that okay? Okay. So, one of the ideas I showed this morning is that you can often be working in a method, and you want to find implementers of something. and you'll go to that, and then you'll bring this open in full context, and then you'll come back and you'll close this window. Well, there's basically a shortcut now. Good, thank you, thank you. Okay, so the shortcut now is that you can bring your method, and this is why I call it browse method in the class context, because that's what it says right here, and it brings that up right in a browser. I mean, a small thing, but if you do that 100 times a day, if you're going there, opening this, opening up again, going back, closing that, all that, those extra steps are just busy work that we don't need. So if you're doing this lots and lots, this can be a big time saver.
Now, was that senders or implementers?
Implementers.
Okay, and if there's multiple implementers?
It usually configure which, particularly like if it's self, it will just bring up the right one.
Okay.
Okay, from the last slide, on the side here, Zoom, if you have, say, a method that's, maybe you're on a very small screen, or you have a method that you haven't refactored yet and it just takes up a lot of space, what you can do is, up here in View, is Zoom. And that's also Alt-Z. And what it does is this. It basically gives as much room as possible to the source code editor for the method. So it can be very easy just to toggle back and forth between that with Alt-Z. So you get a lot of extra space. Very useful if you need that space. Delimiters, I mean, this is pretty much a standard thing, but you used to have to hold one of the, I think it was the control key with 8.x and the new source code editor. You can simply highlight and say parentheses or whatever delimiters that you want. You no longer need that control key. So again, small change, but an improvement. Fonts. Just a couple notes on fonts. If you go to the settings here, editor, you have a list of fonts and sizes. Anybody remembers my talk from last year? I mentioned a font that I was fond of called Bookerly. So I'm going to change this. So that changes. Bookerly is supposed to be a very readable font. So I'm using that in my source code editor now. Make it slightly smaller. So here's a place where you can set what font family you want and the order it's looking for them and the size for the new source code editor quickly and easily. More on fonts, and I'll also talk a little bit about workspace. So workspace, an option you want to know about is Stylus Smalltalk. What this does is uses the autocomplete in the workspace. Without that option on, you don't get it. And I'm going to choose Named Font Selector, Open. Here's a tip. Remember, of course, for Smalltalk, you highlight something and do it. And it's actually been for quite a while. If you have the cursor on the line, it'll execute whatever you have on the line, so you don't need to highlight it. And again, this is one of those little things, but if you take that time to highlight something 200 times a day, if you don't have to do that, that's that much time you save. So this is the do it right up here. So you can see I don't have it selected, but I can indeed execute that. So this is the named font selector. And I'm going to add a new named font. I'm going to call it my large font. And I'm going to choose Arial. Arial 33. And assign to name font. Now I've created that and it's actually available to me. This is not something new per se, but a lot of people don't know about the named font selector. But if I open up a new interface, let's say I place a label here. My big label, apply, and go to the details, font, my large font, apply. So there's a simple place where you can install your own custom font, and it's there and available for use. Some other settings that I'd like you to know about. Look and feel. Right now we see this is set to native. I can change this to be emulated Windows, which will take on that look. I can set it, I mentioned this morning, here's the default red. Apply, there we go. So it's got a red background, and likewise the green. And again, why would you want this? If you're working with multiple images, it's really easy to set them to having a different look. So anytime you grab a window, you know immediately which one it came from. Question?
Is this font saved somewhere? Did you now scratch it up?
I'm sorry?
Is this font saved?
Is the font saved within my image? It is, yes.
So somewhere some code is made now. Will you create
It's installed in one of the dictionaries of available fonts in my system.
So if I throw away this image, I have to recreate it.
If you threw it away right, you'd probably have some code to, if it was for a production thing you're setting up, you'd probably have some code to create that. Good question. Go back to my default look. Okay.
The native font thing. The native font thing is created as a method. So the code to rebuild that font with that name is a method in the image, and you have to take care that this method is
initialized if you start with
packaged with your recipe code. But it's not a real secret or alchemy. So it's easily doable.
Okay. Some code shortcuts. An iterator shortcut, some sorting changes, and some logic changes. And again, some of these are going to be like, well, of course. Okay, an iterator shortcut, here's just some code. An iterator select, an iterator collect. It takes a block. Well, we have a shortcut where you can do this. You see that the top two is the original example. The next set down where it says even numbers 1 to 10, select :pound even. There's been no change in the iterators, what it is the symbol understands the message value and can behave as a block if you walk through the code.
May I comment? This is readable, it's nice to read it.
Yes.
But to debug it, it's a pain. because
That
it's
is-
a step in
That is exactly right. I mean, so if you ask me how I feel about this, here's the negative. In Smalltalk, we want things to be clear and obvious. And you're right, it may not be really obvious if you understand the syntax and blocks and iterators, how they traditionally work. So I looked at this with some healthy skepticism at first. And so I don't like if you're a new person to Smalltalk and you have to debug this. But what I really like about it though is it's terse, short, and once you're familiar with it, it's just less code.
Maybe you can change the debugger if you step into it or so, that you go to code. An extra button.
It still takes you through the symbol acting as a block and performing itself as a message to the receiver. So I mean that's the drawback. The advantage is that it's simpler. It's simply a little less clutter. And as long as what you're writing makes sense and it's clear, that's an advantage. Yes, Neil?
And just also to be aware, it is noticeably slower. This is great for putting something together, write small short code, or maybe for communicating things, maybe sort of domain specific. But be aware, if you have this in some type loop that really needs to perform, you want your code critic to find all these and change them back into blocks before you go into production. Because it is slow.
Good point. So this will work with any of the iterators where they basically have one argument and one thing to perform.
The best thing where you can apply this pattern is in an inspector or workspace where you do not need to debug or where you do not expect that. If you want to debug, don't use that pattern. But the less code you have to write in an inspector, you're happier. So choose whatever you like.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the reading is fine if you have to debug it or if you expect to debug it, choose the other pattern. And if you want to educate, choose the other pattern.
For sorting, if you do much sorting, you may be familiar with a lot of the things you can create. So if you have a collection of numbers as sorted collection, and that actually creates a sorted collection, which you may or may not want. If you say sort, that does an in-place sort with the collection that you have and keeps the identity of that collection, which may or may not make a difference to you. Some more things though.
Maybe one
Sure.
thing the last thing. So you assign sorted numbers with my number sort, but actually it changes the collection my numbers. That's a bit of a problem. But you have to be aware of that. It's not the function.
Good point. Here's a couple more types of sorts, if they don't know how to explicitly sort themselves. So here's if we have a collection of employees and we want to sort them by last name. That's the first example. And especially the more verbose second example where we're doing a subsort. Okay, if they have the same last name, then sort by first name, so a subsort. Well, there's essentially a shortcut to doing this. You can say again to the symbol, you can send a symbol ascending or descending, and then use the method sorted. So you say employee sorted by last name ascending, or for that subsort, and this is much smaller and clear, employee sorted last name ascending, comma, first name ascending, and that will do the subsort.
Sorry, I don't understand the fact. So for instance, you have last name symbols and you send the message ascending.
Yes.
What do you do?
That creates an object appropriate for the sort of code. Yes.
But first name should be also a symbol?
Yes. Yes. That's a typo. Good catch. First name should have a pound sign in front of it. That was a test. Get you past. Okay, so something, another question?
Instead of symbol, you can also use a single argument block. And like with the iterators before, the reverse way is also possible. So you don't need to just have a single argument, like last name in this case. You can also say the person's father and his last name, if you want something like this. And if you are implementing a magnitude subclass, and you implement a less than or equal function, then you can also use
You automatically sort
these
they know how to sort themselves.
functions and call value, so you can reuse this and don't have to implement some complicated sorting function.
Good point. On logic, just briefly, and I think this has long been in Squeaking Pharaoh. It's also, and some people are not even aware that it's there necessarily, where, of course, you have some logic like is nil and if true, if false. And we also have if nil and if not nil, which again can just make your logic slightly terser.
And it's also in line. It's also in line. And
In line? No, I do not believe it is.
Yes, it is.
Is it?
And it also binds the value of the...
I think that's a request we have on the books to
No,
inline that.
Yeah.
Treat.
Hang on. Does the is not nil get an argument?
you can.
Yeah, it's optional.
It's optional.
Okay.
You can also use the symbol syntax from before. You can also use that on different.
Okay, treat. Treat, what is it? It's a, treat is a combination of the words tree and heap. It's a type of collection. You can find it in text.2. Treat. What does it do? It's more elaborate structure. It's a balanced binary tree, and it also keeps a bidirectional linked lists of all the things by sorted order of the key. So it behaves a lot like a dictionary. So on the top is an example of the dictionary. The bottom is an example. You say at put and at, just like a dictionary. But you can also get a hold of the node. And once you have that node, you can get the next one and the previous one. So on the previous level, well, where should I use it? Well, if you're creating a dictionary and you're frequently getting all the keys, sorting them, and then iterating through them in sorted order, maybe you want to use a tree because it keeps them in sorted order. So you wouldn't have to do that extra step. But especially if you have to find something by the key, and then you need to access the ones ahead of it or behind it in value, the adjacent ones, it's going to be much faster with this than trying to find those again with a dictionary. It'd be much more computation. Are there any drawbacks? Well, sure. You're building a more elaborate data structure, and that takes more time and space. So you need to weigh out and balance the trade-offs. But where you can use those benefits, it's probably advantageous to use the tree. One of my favorite frameworks, Suzanne likes to remind me frequently, matrix and polycephaly. You can use these really easily for things like MapReduce. What is MapReduce? MapReduce is a popular and effective technique at addressing large amounts of data and solving them concurrently. It's something Google uses. MapReduce is named after the functions map and reduce. Map applies a function to every object in the list, and reduce, aggregate, or combine the results. So what would those be in Smalltalk? Well, for the map, you can use collect, which applies something to each object. You can use something like fold to aggregate your results. So I've got a couple methods. I'll just go through these. I have an example here that you give it a list of files. It goes through each of those files, counts all the occurrences of each word, and then summarizes the results. So here's the method that you give it a file string. It returns a bag of the words. This is another that says, okay, with the word counts, let's summarize those. And now here's a local example of running this locally. So this does this all sequentially. So I get my files. For each file, I get a word count for that file. I reduce the words, which just summarizes my results. So yeah, I provided all the code so you can try this out yourself, should you choose to. But the upshot is, okay, here's taking that same example. The 2 lines in red are the changes, the only changes in this case. Where I add one new line, VMs, matrix.virtualmachines, new 3. I'm creating 3 machines. And the next line I had to change in order to use, in this case, matrix, to do this concurrently with the multiple cores on a local machine. So it's addressing that concurrently. And again, the upshot of this is it's a relatively simple and straightforward API to use. So it's very effective, pretty simple and straightforward to use. So if you haven't looked at that, you might want to check that out. Store API. I mentioned earlier today that APIs in the development environment are really important because people use them. They use them to customize their development process. And you may very well be using store and tweaking it and doing exactly this. Or maybe you had no idea you could even do this. So a couple things you can do. Some blessings. So when you have a package, you make changes, you publish it, and you give it a blessing. Some examples of blessings are, okay, this is development, this is to review, this package is released. Well, you don't have to use those. You don't have to use those blessings. You can make your own blessings. Back before coming to Cincom, I ran some development for a hedge fund, and we had a different process. We had alpha, beta, and production versions of our application. So we had some blessings like, we did some development, and this is ready for alpha, this is ready for beta, or ready for production. And then later we had some code that would sweep all the things that were, say, ready for beta, we want to do a new beta. Ready for beta and higher, which means it could be anything higher like production. Sweep that into the image, publish everything with a new number, and build our new application. So you can create your own blessings for whatever makes sense for your process. And this is relatively simple and straightforward to do when you look into the product to do this. Another store gem is that, say you're working with let's say you've got an application, you've got hundreds of packages, bunches of developers, you want to update your image to the latest, greatest thing. Well, you can easily say, hey, show me all the recently changed packages, and you get 35 of them, and you go through each one, select, say, okay, loaded. I'm going to load this one, and I load this one. Well, it's going to get pretty tiresome if that's the scenario. I mean, often it's not, but if that is the case, why not use the API to make that simpler? I don't recommend this code for production environment. This is just to show you the idea. What this does, session, store, login, factory, current store session, gets the session, packages, get me all the packages that are newer than what I have in my image, and then for each of those packages, get the most current version and load it. Now, I say you probably wouldn't want to use this in production, maybe in your home set. You would want to elaborate this a little more. I'm just giving you the idea. Why wouldn't you want to use this? Well, if you have changes that you haven't published yet, it's going to overwrite them. You don't want to do that, so you might want to check that. Also, you probably want to check that, if the latest version is the blessing is broken, you probably don't want that. You may not want to get some experimental ones, so you would add more logic in, but with basically just this little bit of code, you can basically, instead of going off through all those 33 packages, is boom, load all the new stuff very quickly and easily. I mentioned this morning the loader, the extended loader, lets you use the development images and understands and sets the right home directory and VM for each. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to flip. This is what the standard one looks like, and this is what the 4-byte loader one looks like. And actually, that is it. So, any questions? Any questions?